This video is brought to you by Squarespace. When most people hear the word unicycle, they think circus. What you might not be aware of is the very, very niche world of extreme unicycling. And I think it might just be the strangest action sport I've ever come across. In today's video, we will explore the weird world of extreme unicycling. Now, we can't talk about the unicycle without mentioning the bicycle, or the bicycle. The bicycle being like the more sensible older brother.
We are the cyclists, the intermediate stage between humans and pure energy.
You know, he got a job, he had kids, and the unicycle being like the problem child, who sits in his room listening to like death metal and tells his bicycle brother that he's trapped in the system, man. So the bicycle was invented in
1790
by Comte de Sivrac, with his creation being called the Celerifre. I mean, it's a terrible name. This bike looked quite similar to the bike that we see today, just without gears. It was kind of like you'd hop along with your feet. But someone come along and went, hold on, this thing is way too practical. What we need is a bike that is considerably less useful. And in
1871,
James Stanley invented the penny farthing. This thing being an absolute babe magnet. If you came riding into town on the back of a penny farthing, you were the boy. The way the penny farthing was designed was like this one massive front wheel and a cute little stabilizing wheel at the back to keep you from falling over. But you see, this little back wheel would quite easily go up. If you prompted it, you could kind of ride on the front wheel. And you know how it is, when you get like a new toy or a gadget, you do all the basic things. And then once that's done, you try and find the weird and harder ways to use it. So penny farthing riders would start to do that. They would like balance on the front wheel, see how long they could stay afloat. And from here, the unicycle was born. Or at least, that's a theory. Like, no one knows for certain, but this is quite likely where it came from. The unicycle was, and is, considerably harder to ride than a bicycle. So if you were one of the people that dared to ride one back in the day and got good at it, you would very likely go on to be like some kind of entertainer. And very quickly, the unicycle become associated with the circus. You would see clowns riding them and like juggling, or you would see performers riding them across tightropes. And this would pretty much be the only place you would see a unicycle for most of the 1900s. But then everything would change in the 80s. Before we go any further, I want to give a massive shout out to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. Squarespace is the ultimate easy to use website building platform. Every time in past that I've needed to make a website, I've always used Squarespace. I've seen it so many times with people who run otherwise really good businesses completely overlook the importance of a good website. Your website is your shop front. If it looks old and it's really awkward to use, it doesn't matter how good the business behind it is, people just aren't going to go in. Squarespace provides tons of templates for you to pick from and customize, and shape them exactly how you want to represent your brand. On top of that, there are tons of built-in functions to help make your website even better. You've got appointment scheduling, email marketing, and even the ability to make members-only content. So if you're looking to level up your business and make it even better, be sure to head over to squarespace.com/Jimmy the Giant. And to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain, use the code Jimmy the Giant. Anyway, back to the video.
Hello, I'm George Peck, and I'm going to show you the few basic skills and equipment you'll need for rough terrain unicycling. And then it's out on the road, so to speak, for a few rounds.
Basically, George, who was like a middle-aged man, he had a full-time job as a judge, told his wife one day that he wanted to try a unicycle. So his wife went to a dump and literally fished out this crappy kid's unicycle from a bin. Like, imagine being George, you pick up this unicycle and it's got like banana peel hanging off of it. But either way, George used it, and he loved it. And he became very quickly obsessed with unicycling. After learning the basics of how to ride and how to balance on like flat ground, George thought he would take this baby off-road and start to tackle harder and harder terrain. Through doing this, he discovered this technique of like bunny hopping. This technique would allow him to do what was effectively trial biking, but on a unicycle. So George got pretty good at this sport that, for all he knew, he was the only one on earth doing. So this prompted him to make a video. In 1991, George would release his iconic video, Rough Terrain Unicycling.
This is a film about rough terrain unicycling.
Which I gotta be honest, if you watch this video, it felt more like a gardening video.
I should be wearing a helmet here, so should you.
You've got this old middle-aged man commentating over it. It's like so relaxing. It felt like something you would find on daytime TV. However, this didn't matter. This video became legendary, and it was basically a how-to guide to mountain unicycling, which was later dubbed Muni, and as well trial unicycling. But what was really weird is, as I say, this wasn't like some 20-something-year-old lad. This was literally a middle-aged man who worked as a judge full-time. George Peck was the last person you'd expect to create an extreme sport.
I have been in water to the top of the wheel, but generally avoid water above the bearings unless you like lots of maintenance.
But anyway, this video released and only 50 copies were ever made. Around this era of like the 80s to the early 90s, only a handful of mountain unicyclists exist on Earth. And they were very separate from each other, like there wasn't a community. You had people like John Voss, Sally Wachowski, Thierry Bouche, a guy called Bradley Bradley. His parents literally called him Bradley Bradley. They were just so taken by the name, they're like, no, we're using that one twice. That's a good one. But as I say, these people were very isolated from each other, doing their own thing separately. That was until one day, when John Voss decided to move to California with the hope to start to grow the mountain unicycling community. And on October 5th, 1996, John hosted the first ever California Mountain Unicycling Weekend. The entire world of Muni packed their bags and headed to California for this massive event. The entire community being like 35 people. But it didn't matter how big or small this event was. It brought together this incredibly small community who had the shared love for unicycling. For the first time ever, they were able to like compare skill and learn from each other and develop new techniques and establish this community of people who like to ride on one wheel down mountain biking trails. They had found their people. Yeah. It's sort of like being a British person and going on holiday and discovering another British person, and you just hear that accent and you're like, you alright, mate? Yeah, you alright, geezer? God, these French people, right? I know, mate, I know. You know, like you unite over that commonality. And that's what I imagine it would have been like for these unicyclists. They'd found people that they didn't know, but they connected with. So from the mid to late 90s, the sport was very small. This was like pre-internet being a big deal. It was very hard to get a hold of people, especially if you're not from the same place. But then one person found out about this event and would come along and change the sport of extreme unicycling forever. Chris Holm. On the third annual Californian weekend in 1998, Chris came along to the event. Chris, being quite a quiet person, he saw all of these unicyclists tackling this one hill. And like no one was gonna make it. It was a very hard hill. They were kind of just doing it for fun and falling off. But Chris sat back and, you know, he waited for his turn. And then he just one bangs it. Everyone's just looking at each other like, what did we just witness? Because this thing was like impossible. And there Chris was, just rolling away, happy as Larry. Chris very quickly made a massive name for himself inside the world of extreme unicycling, which probably wasn't that hard because like 100 people. But he would decide to move to Vancouver, North Shore. And he would start to tackle these trials that were notorious for being super hard in the world of mountain biking on a unicycle. Like it was nothing. Like this was easy. The secret to Chris's skill was kind of developed at a nudist beach called Wreck Beach, where basically hippies would take logs and like put them in formation. You know, like I don't know what they were doing. They're doing hippie stuff with logs. And he would like jump across these logs. Chris's skill on a unicycle was so next level that word traveled outside of the small world of unicycling. His name actually spread to the well-established world of mountain biking. In 1988, Chris would get his first big break, where he would get a video part in a mountain biking video called North Shore Extreme 2nd Edition. The trails that he was doing in this video, as I say, were hard on a bike, but on a unicycle, it was even harder. Keeping balance on just one wheel is like another level of technique and strength. And this video was a success. In 2000, he would get another video part, New World Disorder 1, further showcasing Chris's insane skill set. And then again in 2001, New World Disorder 2. These videos would not only build Chris's profile, but actually the world of unicycling. The fact that these serious mountain biking brands were like giving a seal of approval to unicycling was a massive help to legitimize the sport and take it away from that kind of circus performer image that it had in the past. Chris Holm became the first ever sponsored muni cyclist by Norco Factory Trials. And around the early 2000s, Chris was getting featured in like magazines or television shows like twice a month. He'd become super well known for these clips of him like riding along a mountain edge or across some high up bridge. And he basically became like the Tony Hawk of unicycling, even featuring on a TV show called Thunder Dragon Bhutan on Outside Television. You see, this was all well and good for the world of mountain unicycles, but under the surface, a new movement was bubbling up. And in fact, it was by one man in particular.
With my riding, I try to come up with tricks that haven't been done before.
By the name of Dan Heaton. Dan was the pioneer of street unicycle. You know, like the cool, edgy version of unicycle with rock music and bad boy attitudes. Obviously, Dan was inspired by skateboarding and BMX. He wanted to see what the unicycle could do in these street spots. Interestingly, Dan was one of those 50 people that bought George Peck's video. This video and Chris Holm is what inspired him to leave his own mark on the world of unicycles. So street unicycle was kind of building on a few things. It took elements of like trials unicycle, combined that with like the flat ground freestyle unicycle that was what you would see like circus people do. This combination plus the like street aesthetic bred a very distinct new style of unicycle. In the early days, it was just Dan, practicing in his garden and seeing what he could do. But then one day he plucked up the courage to go to the skate park. And obviously the kids laughed him out of town for bringing a unicycle to a skate park.
You guys trying to join the circus?
You see, at this point he was still new to it. He didn't know what the hell he was doing. He was trying to figure it all out. And secondly, I don't think I'm saying anything controversial here. A unicycle does look a little bit goofy. There's no escaping that fact, and you know how kids are. Dan and his unicycle was a pretty easy target. He would get laughed at constantly and kind of shunned from all the cool kids, but it didn't deter him. Dan kept his head down and kept at it. And throughout the 2000s, Dan would get pretty good, and new people were starting to actually join the sport. And whilst traveling to Santa Cruz, Dan decided that he would make a video with a team of riders to showcase the world this new form of unicycling. This video was called Universe. This was the very first full unicycling video that wasn't just a part in a mountain biking video. After working tirelessly for months on this video, it was premiered in Beijing, China. Which sounds nuts, but basically there's a thing called Unicon, which is the global convention for unicycling, you know, street performers, circus people, but these guys came along as well. So around about 100 people crowded in a small pub around this small TV screen to watch this video. And it was an instant success. People loved it. This video blew up and it went worldwide, inspiring a whole new generation of riders. From here, the sport got bigger, and so did the tricks. That was a problem. The unicycles kept breaking. You know, because the manufacturers at the time didn't account for people to be jumping them down staircases or grinding rails. They were designed for the circus. So these unicycles would constantly break. If you went out for a session with the boys, one of you were at least going home with a broken unicycle. It would cost a ton to maintain, and if your unicycle broke, that might be 3 weeks of you out of the game. So to find a solution to the problem of crappy unicycles, extreme unicycle brands would start to pop up. Bedford Unicycles, Unicycle.com, and Chris Holm would actually make his own brand. These brands not only created good quality unicycles, but they helped to develop the culture of unicycling. Dan Heaton would continue to make more and more videos. With Universe 1, Universe 2, Defect, these videos are still heralded as classics. And within the sport would create like mini celebrities. And so from the early 2000s to about 2010, the world of extreme unicycling found its footing. New wave of riders were coming through and really progressing the sport. People such as Ryan
Cremaster,
the legendary Lutz Etchold, who I actually got to speak to and is probably the most German person I've ever met.
Hello.
Hey, nice to meet you. My name is Lutz Etchold. I'm a unicyclist. I did it for many years professional. I did lots of records, for example, the highest unicycle jump. Longest slackline crossed, riding on a bottle, on a rail of beer bottles.
Lutz tackled the Damavand in Iran, being a 5,671 meter descent down a mountain. This baby took him 3 years to plan and prepare, and one day he aims to descend down Kilimanjaro.
You were wanting to do Kilimanjaro one day. Is that still something?
Yeah, I still want to do Kilimanjaro. I still have some other projects too. I don't know if I will do it next year or in 3 years, but I'm quite sure that I will do it one time when it's perfect. It will be hard, but it will be hard on many aspects, mentally, physically. And so I think even when I'm like, I don't know, 39, I probably could still try it if I practice enough before. Yeah, I hope that nobody else does it next year.
Yeah, that's the worry, isn't it?
Other riders like Chris Horoway further pushed the sport throughout like the 2010s. You have people like Sean Johannesson, Eli Brill, Tim Desmet, and many more. And throughout the years, there's been a ton of competitions and meetups. The Californian Mountain Unicycling Weekend is still running. You have the British Muni Weekend, and you have Unicon, which is like the World Championships. On top of that, there's been some pretty insane world's firsts. I'll go through a couple. You've got the crank flip by Mike Clark in 2004. Adrian Delacroix did a front flip on a unicycle. The 1260 Uni-Spin by Eli Brill. As well, separately, there's like this new world of like endurance unicycling. This geezer called Ed Pratt in 2015 spent about 3 years traveling around the world on a unicycle. There's a lady by the name of like Jana Temmerbergen who got the speed record of 40 miles per hour in 2020, which actually beats out the men's world record. So she is the all-out world record holder. And yeah, nowadays the sport is extremely niche. It always has been. There are still quite a number of new riders pushing this sport, and it's progressed heavily in terms of like style quite recently. With riders like Mimo Seidler, who's just super steezy. Like, he dresses really cool and he just rides in this stylish sort of way. Waylon Batt, Clement Puyol, and Jack Seban, who has a YouTube channel and he's trying to push the like content side of unicycling. Over the years, there have been some big videos that have got some views. But as I say, it's a very niche sport. Due to the very high barrier for entry when it comes to skill, like it's a hard thing to do, and the slight goofiness, you know, it does look a bit funny. I'm sorry, but it does. It will very likely remain niche. But nonetheless, I was pleasantly surprised to look into this community. I'm gonna start to give these subcultures a rating. So this one gets a Jimmy score of 7.5 out of 10. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. You can support me by picking something up on jimmythegiant.co.uk, supporting me on Patreon or using the sponsor link below. Peace.